Hello, welcome to Taxpayer Alert. I'm Al Segalla. I'll be your moderator. I'm also president of the Calaveras County Taxpayer Association, who sponsors this show. We try to provide interesting people with good information about what's happening in the county, and so that you return for more. This show is no exception. We have Joe Metzger, who's he's a public relations officer with our water district, CCWD. Joel, welcome.
Al, pleasure to be here.
Now, you do so many things. Let's touch on some of that so our audience could get a better picture about you before we get into the water district.
Sure. So maybe a little bit about my background.
Yeah.
I was born in Sonora and grew up in Calaveras County in San Andreas. And my dad, Randy, was the county assessor for many, many years. And we have a small farm just outside of town. And so I grew up loving this county and, getting to know everyone. And it's just a fantastic place to be raised as a child. And then I went off to Columbia College, and then from there I transferred down to Sonoma State University and got a degree in political science, and ended up coming back to Calaveras County for what I thought was just the summer. And I randomly got an offer to do a 6-month internship at the Calaveras Enterprise newspaper. And so I decided, okay, that can't hurt. And so I started working for the paper. And I found that I loved journalism, and it was just a fantastic thing to do. And what I especially found out is that as I was sent to all the assignments, I fell more in love with Calaveras County than I ever had as a child. In fact, I almost wanted to get away during my teens because it seemed like a small country town that I wanted to escape from. But through that job at the Enterprise, I worked my way up to editor. And, did that for about 6 years between being a journalist and editor, and it was a fantastic experience. And then a job opening came open at CCWD for the public relations PIO position and the customer service manager. And that was in 2014 that I started at CCWD. And then since starting there, I've worked my way to kind of a different position, which still includes the public information and being the face of the district. But also, I've now taken over the grants program. And so I'm basically the clearinghouse for all the grants, and I bring all the staff together to write those and get those submitted. And I also run the legislative program. We are very active in Sacramento, making sure that we can influence legislation. And also on the federal side, we work on federal legislation as well. And then the final thing I do for CCWD is the water use efficiency program. And so as many people remember, we went through a historic drought recently. And I was very busy making sure that we met the state mandates during that time. So that is what I'm currently doing, those 4 main things.
Well, you've got a plate full, Joel. Now, apparently you did your job too well, and you caused people to cut back in their consumption of water to such an extent you took away your income.
It's true. It's true, Al. I'm very proud of this community and how much they stepped up during the drought to cut back on their water usage. We saw people taking lawns out. We saw people changing their landscaping to drought-tolerant landscaping. Toilets went from very water-heavy users down to very efficient toilets. People changed their irrigation practices. They just stopped wasting water and made some serious sacrifices. One of the ones I hear about is when you took a shower, when you're waiting for the water to get hot, you'd catch that in a bucket and then water your plants with it. So, serious day-to-day sacrifices. Those sacrifices led to savings of up to 40% during the hottest summer months during the worst of the drought. So 2015 was really the worst. And while I'm very proud and thankful for those achievements, and the state recognized us for those achievements, it also caused our consumptive revenue to go down dramatically. And we count on water sales for a pretty good chunk of our budget. And during the worst of the drought, our sales were down by about $700,000 each year.
Wow.
And when you have a budget of, only about $16 million, that's a big chunk of funds. And so we had to dip into our reserves in order to cover that deficit. And we also had to look at how are we going to make this sustainable moving forward if those water sales don't come back. And it turned out that a lot of these cuts are fairly permanent. People have made lifestyle changes. We're not ever going to see the water use rise back to what it was before. But one thing that I'm especially proud of is that during the worst of it, we didn't put a drought surcharge into effect. Many agencies across the state saw these declining water revenues, and they did a drought surcharge. So basically, you're paying more money to keep the district afloat during the drought. We never did that. We used reserves. But at some point, dipping into reserves is not sustainable, and we need to address that budget gap.
Also, there's this blessing that your water company has. You don't have any shortage of water. In other words, the state was using something that could apply to other water districts, but didn't apply to you because you didn't have a water shortage.
That's a really good point. We have been planning very carefully since 1946 when we were established. And for those who don't know, New Spicer Reservoir, way up in the High Sierra, belongs to CCWD. That dam and hydro facility belong to CCWD. That stores almost 200,000 acre-feet of water way up in the high country. And we use that water to release down the Stanislaus River through Big Tree State Park, and then we divert it out of McKay's Point Reservoir through a 9-mile tunnel, and we bring it up to the surface in Avery and treat that water, and it provides Arnold customers with water, Avery, Forest Meadows. And then we also take some of that water out down in Copperopolis and out of Lake Tulloch, and we provide all those folks with water. And that's just one of 3 rivers that we have access to. The Calaveras River in Hogan we also have access to, and the McCollum River for West Point and Wilseyville customers. And so the point is, we had planned so well and had so much reserves of water that even during the depths of the drought in 2015, when many people in the state were running out of water, we were not.
Yeah.
In fact, we had enough water to meet our customers' demands. And the truth is, if the state had not mandated that we ask our customers to cut back, which they did, we would not have had to have done nearly as draconian of cuts, and we would have seen those revenues not dip as deep. And that really comes down to how the State Water Resources Control Board approached the drought. And what they did is they took a one-size-fits-all approach, and they just said everyone's going to be cutting, not based on your planning and your water supply, but based on how many gallons each person uses per day at their home. And if you had higher gallon usage per person per day, then you would have to cut back more. And if you had lower, then you would have to cut back less. And there are many reasons why that really wasn't the best approach for the drought. There should have been more consideration for past investments in infrastructure and water supply.
Would you say that the philosophy at that time was more directed toward abundance as far as planning and management, or now it's directed more towards scarcity?
It seems to me as though the state of California has quite a bit of water that does flow through the state, whether it's in a wet year or a dry year. And we have an incredible world-class water delivery system. I think where the challenge comes in is how do we use that water, and where should it go, and what are the priorities for that, where that water should go. And so those type of thought processes will pit the environment against farmers, against residential use, against commercial use. And there are all these needs, including pushing salt water out of the delta. If you don't have enough water flowing out of the delta, then you'll have saltwater intrusion, and you could lose farmland. You could also lose water quality for residential commercial use. And so there are all these kind of competing goals, and California calls it co-equal goals. And that's really what we believe in, is a plan that treats all of these goals equally and making sure that we have a balance. What we've seen since the drought and since the State Water Resources Control Board got more involved in water management is a very specific laser focus on residential water use. And I should remind our viewers that less than 10% of the water available in California is used for residential use. The vast majority of the raw water resources is used for agriculture and environmental. So keeping flows in streams so we can have ecosystems that are healthy. And then also California produces more food than just about anywhere in the world in the Central Valley. So we use a lot for agriculture. But the target has been on residential. And that's another question is why are we spending so much time cutting back residential use when we could make changes to agricultural or how we manage the environmental water and actually save significantly more water than we could with the residential changes. So that's another thing that I think we should be thinking about. But I do want to share that the state is currently looking to mandate permanent water conservation measures. There was a robust legislative effort last year by the Governor Brown specifically, and his staff. And they did fail to push that legislation through. It came very close. I personally and CCWD were involved in attending meetings in Sacramento, writing comment letters, attending committee hearings where the lawmakers met to discuss these things. And we were instrumental in preventing what we think was not good water policy from going through. And just to give you an example of what this would be like, one of the proposals was for the state to fly over all of our homes with an airplane and take high-resolution photographs of our backyards and front yards. And then they would run those photos through a software program, and they would analyze how much water they believe is an efficient use for that landscaping. So for your lawn, your landscaping, your trees. And they would calculate a water budget for each parcel. And then they would calculate, okay, all these water budgets added together for Calaveras County Water District equals X amount of water. And then we would be held responsible for using that amount of water or less. And if we went over, it would be a wasteful use of water. That is an intrusion, we believe. The technology isn't there to be accurate. And we don't really believe that it's the state's responsibility to come in and micromanage to that extent. We want to retain our authority over our local water resources.
George Orwell didn't quite have the imagination to think of that.
It's incredible. It's incredible what's being proposed. And so I want everyone to know that we're very aware of these issues, and we are fighting to make sure that we retain our ability to enjoy these rich water resources that we're so fortunate to have. I mean, I think water is probably the most valuable resource that we have in this county, and we have a lot of it.
Yeah. The only thing it compares to that is air.
Right. I mean, yeah, certainly
Oxygen.
air is important too.
And that wonderful nutrient called carbon dioxide.
That's right.
Not many people realize how important that is to plants.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
One of the things that our Taxpayer group is interested in is to try to make a better tomorrow by encouraging government to act in a more responsible manner. In other words, to protect people's rights rather than oppress them. Mm-hmm. And there are several things that the district's interested in and would like support from the public and our Taxpayer group, and we'd be most willing to be helpful as we can. We're just a volunteer organization, but we do reach out a little bit. And what are some of the things you think that we can help at?
Well, since we're on legislation, I think that there are two really key issues coming up next year in addition to the water conservation push. And I will say that even though we were able to postpone the water conservation legislation in this 2017 session, it's coming back in 2018. So we definitely believe the Taxpayer Association could be helpful in the water conservation comments and public hearing attendance and sending letters. The other two issues are SB 623 by Monning. That is referred to by us as the water tax. That is an effort to help low-income communities have access to safe drinking water. And the goal of this legislation is very admirable, and I'm 100% in support of making sure everyone has safe drinking water and has access to that. And some low-income communities don't have the financial resources to upgrade their plants and provide safe drinking water. Some of the biggest problems are down in the southern Central Valley, Fresno area around there. The groundwater is in very poor condition. It's the means of funding this legislation that we take issue with. SB 623 is looking to add...
61 or 63?
SB 623.
Oh, 623. Okay.
623. It's looking to add a tax to every water bill that goes out. And it may only be $1 or $2. Excuse me. But that tax is the beginning of what could be a very slippery slope for using water bills to tax the public and then create a new state bureaucracy, collect those monies, and then distribute those to those who are most in need. And again, we 100% support safe drinking water for everyone, but we believe that the fund should come either from the general fund, from grant funding, from the State Water Resources Control Board Clean Water Revolving Fund, or other funding mechanisms. We don't believe that it's appropriate to put a tax on water bills, and we think that if this does go through, then it will be the first of many taxes that go on water bills. And so we are adamantly opposed to that means of funding, and we will be working very hard in 2018 to make sure that that's not the funding source for this bill.
Well, we'll join you on that, for sure.
Absolutely. And then I'll just quickly touch on AB 401. That is safe drinking water for all, with especially low-income folks. It's for affordable drinking water. So AB 401 is already law, and it's going to be implemented within the next 2 or 3 years. There's a report that's being prepared by the state staff right now, and it's due out by January or February. The point is, drinking water may not be affordable for everyone right now, and they would like to provide a subsidy or a tax credit or some form of financial assistance to help people afford their drinking water. And currently, they're looking at possibly charging everyone a little extra on their bills, similar to AB 623, and then putting that into a fund so they can then give that back to folks. Again, we understand that people may need help with their bill, and that it may be unaffordable currently, but we want to make sure that the funding mechanism itself is done properly. And right now, there are many questions about who qualifies for that subsidy, what the threshold is. Currently, I believe 38% of Californians could qualify under the current level. That seems like an awful lot of people and an awful huge bill in order to fund that. And so we want to make sure we're part of the process, we make comments, and that we protect our ratepayers and our county from any kind of tax or fee that wouldn't be appropriate. But again, the goal is admirable, making sure that people have help if they are in need and truly can't afford their water bill. We certainly would never protest that goal.
It's almost like robbing Peter to pay Paul. A little bit seems to be good, but when it gets out of hand, both Peter and Paul lose.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you have a capital renovation and replacement program. What project has the district recently completed, and what projects will be built in the coming years?
Well, I'm so proud to say that we just completed a pipeline replacement project called the Reach 3A project. That's in downtown Arnold, and this is a 12-inch water line that was about 20,000 linear feet long, and it went all the way through the middle of town. So talk about a complicated project, because there were so many people who were impacted, not just residential homes, but businesses as well. And so we've been working on this project for the last couple years in construction. We just completed it in October, and this line was initially constructed in 1965, and it was rusted out, and it was springing leaks. In fact, one year we had a leak that took place right near Highway 4. There was a geyser of water that went about 100 feet in the air because this line is under so much pressure. If there had been someone walking by there or a car going over the road, if it came up under the road, it could have caused serious injury. So we had a public safety hazard because of this line. So we're really, really glad to have that replaced. And another neat thing about that is that we really had a good relationship with the community during the whole project, and we were able to do it in a way that was not obtrusive and had the least impacts possible. And we were very careful to design it in a way that was thoughtful to minimize the impact. So very proud of the Reach 3A project. And by the way, that project would not have been possible without the ratepayer funds. There were 2 rate increases, one in 2013, one in 2014. Those rate increases put funds into a specific fund that was reserved for capital improvement projects. And without those funds and without that increase, we simply would not have had the funds to do the Reach 3A project. And it's not just that project that's getting funded. We have near $100 million worth of projects that need to be done. And as the system ages, more and more projects come up. And so this fund continues, and we will be using those funds to do projects. Another project we used those funds for was during the drought. Lake Tulloch was under threat of being drawn down to a very low level that would have been below our water intake. And so we used R&R funds to lower the intake by about 45 feet deeper into the reservoir so we could make sure Copperopolis still had water. That's about a $650,000 project. Reach 3A was $5.3 million. So very, very expensive project. Projects that are on the radar coming up, we have Reach 1, which goes from Avery down to Forest Meadows area. That's another large diameter transmission pipeline. That's going to be about a $5 million project. It's in the planning phase right now. We also have a pre-treatment facility going into the Valley Springs area. We get water out of the Calaveras River below New Hogan Reservoir, and the Butte Fire damaged the Calaveras River watershed so badly that all kinds of soil erosion and potentially toxic chemicals and organics are washing into the river, washing into New Hogan, and then they're being released, and we're trying to treat this very dirty, turbid water. It got so bad during some storm events after the Butte Fire, we had to shut the plant down. And so this pretreatment facility gives us one more layer of protection between the raw water that's been damaged by the Butte Fire and our pretreatment plant. And we got millions of dollars in grant money from FEMA to help us do that project, which makes it much more affordable for us.
And you haven't rated your replacement funds to operate the business. In other words, you're keeping them separate so that you're going to be able to continue replacing your pipelines as you need to, and when you have a problem in expenses being higher than your income, you try to solve that without rating those funds.
That's right. And many agencies, they put it all in the same pot. And what happens is the capital improvement fund gets rated to get the operations fund going.
Right.
And once you start doing that, then you no longer can keep your system upgraded. And then you end up spending a lot more on emergency repairs than you did if you have a very thoughtful, proactive program. Another one of the projects down in Jennyland is we're putting pressure-reducing valves in Rancho Calaveras to reduce pressure, and we've had some people have issues with high pressure down there. That's going to be happening early 2018. And then the final major project is down in Copperopolis. We're going to be moving a sewer line in the Poker Flat neighborhood out from underneath the lake. Really never should have been there in the first place, but we need to get that line out to O'Byrne's Ferry Road so it's far away from the lake so we don't have a sewer spill risk. We're doing a lot of upgrades to the lift stations, such as the sewer pumps down there, for safety. So that's a very big project. And again, all of this is moving ahead full steam, funded by the Capital R&R program, which came from those rate increases in 2013, 2014. But here's the thing, Al. Those rate increases didn't help our operating fund, and we're facing a large budget deficit in the operating fund. And so I just want to share with everyone that addressing that budget deficit is really our main priority right now. Especially on the sewer side, we have a big operating fund deficit. And that's not the same fund as the capital program. Remember, those funds are separate. We haven't had an increase in rates to support the operating expenses since 2011. So we've gone 6-7 years now without having any kind of an increase, and all of our costs are going up. And as we mentioned earlier in the program, with the drought, our revenues are actually going down by near $700,000 just in the drought alone. And between all of these costs going up and revenues going down, we have some big budget gaps that have arisen. And so in early 2018, we will be presenting a plan to solve those gaps. It's a combination of us making cuts and also having to enhance, have a revenue enhancement through rates. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but we're committed to getting the public involved in this process. We're meeting with community leaders already, yourself included. We're going to continue to meet with community leaders and go out to the public, have town hall meetings, attend meetings that are already taking place to do presentations. We want input. We want feedback. We want to know what the impacts will be. We want good ideas. And we want to make sure that it's a transparent process and that everyone understands why it's happening.
Is it possible to sell more water?
It is possible to sell more water. One, people would need to use more water and buy more water, our own customers.
Not just our own area, but other areas.
Yes, there are opportunities to sell water to other areas. Our main priority in investigating those potential water sales would be helping the local area. So kind of within basin, neighboring counties would be the main folks we want to help first.
Right.
There may be opportunities to sell water to other folks who are farther away. An example is agencies like Oakdale Irrigation District. They sell millions of dollars worth of water every year that comes out of New Maloney's reservoir. So there are examples of agencies who've done that. The thing about that is it's a very complex regulatory environment, and it's not an easy thing to do. And I think there's still a lot more work that would need to take place to get that revenue enhancement from water sales. But it is something that we're looking into.
The water supply update. The drought ended in 2016. What's the water supply like now? Are there any water conservation rules still in effect?
So the good news is that we have no mandatory cutbacks that the state has forced upon us at this point. We were able to lift those more than a year ago. And we do have some common sense measures. It's not so much water conservation. It's more trying to get people not to waste water. But the message is that you can use water normally as long as you aren't wasting water. An example of wasting water would be if you watered your lawn so much that it runs off your lawn into the street drain and down, and it's just pouring into that street drain. Well, that's not allowed because that's a waste of water. The state doesn't want people to be using a hose without an automatic shut-off nozzle to wash cars. They don't want you washing down hard surfaces like your decks and your driveways, things of that nature. So these are, again, common sense measures that are in effect. But in terms of what landscaping or gardening or orchards you want to have, it's business as usual. As long as you're using water wisely, you have no restrictions. You can water every day of the week. I would say if it's raining, please don't water because that doesn't make very much sense. Make sure your sprinklers are off during the wintertime. Most people should really only be using indoor water during the wintertime. And then as we get into spring, summer, then we'll see that outdoor water usage ramp back up again. And we have tons of tips on our website, CCWD.org, about how to use water efficiently.
Have you observed any effort for rainwater capture from roof and gutters?
Absolutely. In fact, there's a partnership with Tuolumne County Resource Conservation District. They are offering a significant subsidy on the purchase of rainwater catchment systems. And you can put in a series of barrels or large tanks, hook them up to your gutter system if you're along the Highway 4 corridor or south of there. And you can catch that rainwater and you can get it mostly paid for by the conservation district. So it's something that's catching on quite a bit.
I didn't know about that. I put a system in for our home, but it turned out the district water was cheaper because pumping the water to a tank was more expensive. So I didn't use the system.
Well, it may, it doesn't always pencil out, just like gray water doesn't always pencil out. But I think that these are innovative techniques where we can try to make better use of the resources that we have. So sometimes it's worth it.
Joel, thank you so much for being our guest and really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you for watching Taxpayer Alert. See you next time.